Yeah,
Such
wow.
a tough, teachers and students everywhere, just extraordinary conditions.
We're all online, and I won't go back until
Yeah,
Such a
wow.
tough.
a whole bunch of people take the vaccine, and then I can take it.
Yeah, it just
Well,
doesn't.
we were just wondering, so we're streaming live now. We're about 5 minutes, 7 minutes out. And we're wondering, Whitney, what you're cooking these days.
I don't
Whitney is an excellent cook.
I can only imagine.
know. I don't cook anymore. My husband cooks. I taught him how.
That's
What's the favorite meal that you taught?
Oh, well, he's sort of taken it from there. I taught him the basics because I grew up in a family with children, and so I had to learn how to cook for 8 people. And so, it was never anything fancy because my mother was not into cuisine at all. She was into feeding 6 kids. And so what I did was in sort of growing out on my own and liking my own types of foods, I learned some basic skills on how to scale up and scale down, and basics that can kind of get you through lots of different substances. Vegetables are steamed. They go in the oven if you put cheese on them. Things like that. So, a lot of sauteing, a lot of stir fry. We do a lot of fish and chicken, but we're trying to go back to just doing veg and maybe, adding in proteins in other ways. I just started working with a nutritionalist, so I'm at the front end of learning how to eat less, probably, because I think well, but I like to
That's
eat.
the hard part.
It's the amount that's really the problem for me. But he does all kinds of things. He did a vegetable stir fry with quinoa the other night, and he likes to grill when the weather's nice. If it's okay, even in the winter, he'll go out and grill, and we'll eat swordfish or salmon or something like that. So it's not super fancy food, but it's good and it tastes good and it's seasoned nicely, and we go in that direction.
It sounds pretty great.
Oh, yeah.
And Amy, what's your household like?
Oh, I do like to cook. When we had our 3 kids at home, it was a bigger job than it is now. I'm in love with the New York Times cooking app. I find that my go-to place, and just seems like everything I cook, I like from there. So, but I do like to cook. I miss. It's not that much fun cooking for 2 people as opposed to 5. It's more work, but it's also more fun, and there's more gratification. I think when you have a larger audience.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
I have the pizza dough recipe on the New York Times app is my very favorite pizza dough.
I use that. I like that too. It's so
Sam
easy.
Siftons.
Yes, and it works. Yeah.
Yes.
My new favorite thing was learning how to bake my mother-in-law's Irish soda bread,
Ooh.
which I got on the 3rd try.
I love Irish soda bread. It's so delicious.
Yeah, she had given me her recipe, but she forgot to tell me a couple of things that she had changed on it. And so I made my husband talk to her and get all the secrets out of her before I did it again.
I love this idea, Whitney, of recipes you have to try many times, especially to carry on a tradition.
Yeah.
To have an example, my grandmother made a lamb cake that I think I had to do 12 times to get to to have it match the memory.
Right.
Very fun.
That's some serious commitment.
What?
That's some serious commitment, 12 times.
It really was,
yeah.
because, I didn't get the recipe from her. I just got the mold. And so figuring out how to, and it's one of those molds where you can't see, you don't see it bake inside. You just have to get all the conditions just right to.
So is it a cake made of lamb, or is it a cake that's in the mold, like the Easter lamb?
It's the Easter lamb cake. It's a 2-part mold, and it's 2 pieces, and you put batter in half, and then you tie the mold together, so you can't even check it.
Oh,
So that means twice as many tries. You have to, and it turns out like tripling the baking soda is the big the big key.
oh, that's great. I was thinking the first way, the cake,
Made up
lamb
lamb.
cake, which is fine. They're such, meatballs, whatever. But I was.
Yeah. No, Easter cake.
Does it like stand up on its feet?
It stands up. It's sort of resting, but it's I'll have to send you a picture.
Yes, please.
I would imagine it's like the little lamb sitting down with its legs tucked into itself.
Yeah, that's it. Right, with jelly bean eyes.
And then you
That's
have to
great.
put white frosting on it to make it look like it's lamb's wool.
Yes, exactly. With it, that's exactly right. None of my kids were allowed to go to college until they could prove they could make it.
That's great. I
I have
love
to
it.
say, for as bad as my mother was at being a cook, she was an excellent baker. She really was premier at that. And her mother was an excellent baker too. So I've got baking that comes down rather than cooking foods. And who doesn't like to eat baked goods?
Baking is fun.
Yeah.
Baking's really fun.
Very fun. Okay, so Rich, are we at 7 o'clock and ready to go?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So welcome, everyone. We're so glad that you're here with us tonight for the Norman Rockwell Freedom from Want program, which is part of our Imagining Freedom series. My name is Mary Burley, and I'm the chief educator at the museum, and we have a wonderful group of panelists tonight. I'm going to introduce them, give you a little sense of the flow, and then we have a lot to look forward to. With me is from the museum is Stephanie Habush Plunkett. Stephanie is the chief curator and deputy director and the co-curator of the Imagining Freedom exhibition, which is now on view at the museum. And tonight we are talking about the American ideal, freedom from want, which Norman Rockwell depicted in his war bond poster from 1943 by that name. Whitney Sherman is an award-winning illustrator, educator, and entrepreneur. She presently directs the MFA in Illustration program at MICA. She is co-director of Dolphin Press and Print, and she has been, her illustrations have shown up in pretty much all of the major American publications, including the New York Times, Business Week, most national publications. Also with us is Amy Bentley, who is the professor of food studies at New York University. She brings a historian's touch to the conversation with interests in the social, historical, and cultural contexts of food. She is the author of Inventing Baby Food, Taste, Health, and the Industrialization of the American Diet. And that book was actually a James Beard Award finalist, which is so impressive. And finally, we have Alana Chemila with us. And Alana also is extraordinarily accomplished. She is a cookbook author. And she writes, cooks, and teaches cooking and cheese making. She blogs at Eating from the Ground Up, and she's been a featured contributor for numerous publications, including Yankee Magazine, Martha Stewart Living, Parents, Fine Cooking, and Food 52. She is the author of numerous cookbooks, including 2 of my very favorites, The Homemade Pantry and Cooking from the Ground Up, or Eating from the Ground Up. Also, Alana is a marketing director at Guido's Marketplace nearby in Great Barrington and Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and has done extraordinary work in the community lately, talking with people about what Thanksgiving 2020 might look like. And so, Alana, we're so glad for your perspective and that you've been out in the field talking about this particular time and have thoughts to share. And I want to just read one quote. Charnelia is not preachy nor judgmental, rather she's more like a friend offering a gentle guiding hand. She gives us the inspiration we seek, something we all need tonight. So we're going to start with Stephanie sharing historical context with some of a visual context with Norman Rockwell's images. And from there, we will learn a little bit about the American history of food, including the tension between abundance and want. And at that point, Whitney will share a visual journey from her 4 decades of looking at the human condition through making illustrations. And then Alana will bring us in with perspective on the current context and getting ready for Thanksgiving. So Stephanie, let me hand it over to you.
Okay, sounds great. Hi, everybody. It's wonderful to see you, and we're really glad you joined us this evening. We thought it might be a lot of fun, of course, to just give a little historical background on a couple of very well-known Norman Rockwell images. And of course, Freedom from Want is a piece that is a gem of the Norman Rockwell Museum's collection and the subject of tonight's talk. So a little bit of background on this. Interestingly, Rockwell chose the All-American Thanksgiving, or the feeling of the All-American Thanksgiving, to create a sense of what freedom from want might actually represent in the best possible sense. You probably all know by now that Norman Rockwell's 4 freedoms were inspired by Franklin D. Roosevelt's 1941 address to Congress, in which he was outlining the freedoms that we would be actually willing to fight for. And of course, they were freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. So of course, this painting is wonderful in its vibrancy. It is certainly one of Norman Rockwell's most parodied or appropriated paintings, and it is definitely a constructed reality. It features Norman Rockwell's neighbors and friends who posed in his studio in individual sessions, including Mrs. Thaddeus Wheaton, who's holding the turkey. Which
Stephanie, I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. I'm so sorry, but your screen is still on the opening slide.
Oh, okay. See, on my computer, it is on freedom from want. So
okay. I think we have to maybe come out and come back into it.
Yeah.
You're sharing the wrong thing.
What, Rich?
You're sharing the PowerPoint, but not the presentation. The presentation view.
Okay.
So while we're waiting for
I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to go
and
back.
Stephanie, I'm just going to mention that Rich Bradway, our digital director, and Alyssa Stubel are both behind the scenes supporting. There we go. That's perfect.
Can you see that now? All right, terrific. Now we can see the painting we're talking about. I apologize for that. So you're actually seeing a number of close relations to Rockwell. Mrs. Thaddeus Wheaton is holding the turkey, which looks in some ways as light as a feather. And she was someone who came and cooked for the Rockwell family occasionally. But we also see on the bottom left side, Norman Rockwell's wife, Mary Barstow Rockwell. And across the table, the woman with the white hair was Rockwell's mother, Nancy Hill Rockwell. I think one of the wonderful things about this painting is that Rockwell challenged himself to express all of the wonderful textures you might find on such a table. And if anyone has ever painted, you know how hard it is to paint reflections of light on china, and transparent water in glasses. But interestingly, Rockwell, kind of despite his own artistic optimism in this scene, he did have misgivings about depicting the bounty of the holiday during World War II, when much of Europe was, as he said, starving, overrun, and displaced. And in letters to Rockwell, the public commented upon the abundance of food, but they also commented upon the importance of community and conviviality and coming around a table together as a point of reference. So freedom from want appeared along with the other 4 freedoms in 4 consecutive issues of the Saturday Evening Post in February and March of 1943, but on the interior of the magazine, not on the covers. And the accompanying the 4 freedoms were essays by some noted American authors, including Booth Tarkington, who wrote about speech, Will Durant, who wrote about worship, Stephen Vincent Benet, who wrote about fear, and Carlos Sampayan Belosan, who wrote about want. And you're seeing an image of Carlos Belosan here. Belosan was different from the other 3 writers who were at the height of their careers when their essays were published. But Belosan was a little-known Filipino poet at the time, and he was a migrant worker in his 20s. So this was a very unusual and unexpected choice for the Saturday Evening Post. And in fact, his essay relating to freedom from want really did bring him to some fame. Belosan had experienced freedom from want himself. And so in some ways, that was a very strong contrast to Norman Rockwell's scene of middle-class bounty. Belosan addressed his subject in the collective voice of the downtrodden. And I have to say that we are very honored to have listening to this program, Sunny Sampayan, who is Belosan's nephew, and I believe he's listening with his wife, Edith. So we're really happy to have them on the program tonight. And I'll just leave you with saying grace, which I have to say, I think is one of Rockwell's great masterpieces. It was also a Thanksgiving cover for the Saturday Evening Post. And of course, Rockwell was always challenged to come up with ideas. And it was really pretty unusual that Rockwell would actually accept an outside idea for one of his illustrations, though he received many in the mail. So in the fall of 1951, he received a letter from a woman in Upper Derby, Pennsylvania, describing a scene that she had witnessed in the Automat in Philadelphia, if anybody remembers automats. Seated at a table, she observed a young woman and a little boy of about 5. They walked by her with food-laden trays, laughing and happy to be in the restaurant. They took off their coats, hung them up, and returned to their table, at which 2 men were already seated. And as she wrote, they were shoving their lunch, in quotes. She said the woman and the boy folded their hands, bowed their heads, and prayed for about 2 minutes. From this description, Rockwell constructed the painting. He hired a photographer to take photos from inside an automat in New York City and another to take photos of a street scene in Albany. He worked with these 2 locations as his background, but in the end decided on a view of industrial buildings in Rensselaer, New York, which is what you're seeing here, across the river from Albany. Earlier versions of the view through the window were busy with storefronts, cars, buses, and people. We can assume he found this to be too distracting from the quiet scene that he was creating inside the restaurant. The natural gray tones of the buildings, shrouded in smoke, allow them to blend away in the background. hearing the facts of the actual incident and then seeing how Rockwell developed it is an interesting exercise. And so I think another interesting fact is that what Rockwell actually said about this painting is that if this had actually happened, he feels that most likely no one would have noticed what the boy and the woman were doing. But because as an illustrator, he has the ability to establish a narrative, he created a scenario where a lot of what's happening here has to do with people's reactions to the prayer. And one of the people that is actually reacting is Rockwell's own son, Jarvis Rockwell, who's one of the young men who you can actually see straight on in the picture. So with that little bit of background about people gathering around tables in various ways, I'm really happy to turn this program over to Amy Bentley.
Thank you, Stephanie. And thank you, Stephanie, Mary, Rich, and everyone who's involved in creating this program. I'm really so happy to be a part of it. Just to go over a little bit of the Freedom from Want image. Stephanie, I didn't know that all the people in the painting were real people in his life. That's so interesting. I love that. As Stephanie mentioned, this was a really popular image during World War II when there was a lot of worry and deprivation, and over half of the American food supply was being sent overseas to allies, to the military, to newly liberated country. It was really the literal fuel of the total war effort. And so Americans had to do things like can their own food, grow victory gardens, conserve foods, not waste things. And the farmers performed miraculous jobs producing more food than they had prior to the war with fewer workers. So it was really an all-out effort to create enough food to fuel this long and devastating world war. But of course they did it, and it was part of the idea of American abundance, which has always existed, even from early colonial times, explorer times. The United States, North America has always been characterized as this land of abundance, a land of milk and honey, overflowing resources, animals and plants. And it is resource rich. It's a land that is definitely resource rich. And it's one of the reasons that United States is so wealthy and so abundant. And of course was during the war and after World War II, continued that abundance and became one of the two superpowers. If we could go to the next slide. This is just a simple graph of American agricultural output, which just continued to climb and climb and climb and climb, producing huge amounts of food, feeding everybody, sufficient to feed everybody numerous times over, and also to export food abroad, which is a great thing. For most of human history, the problem has been getting enough food and enough food around the year during the winter and early spring when food was very scarce. So with industrialization, with this industrial farm output, Americans had more than enough to eat, and it was shelf stable, safe, and relatively inexpensive. So that's a good thing. If we can go to the next slide. With all of that technology and effort putting into products like freeze drying, packaging products for the military, all of that after the war came back to the United States. And so we call the post-World War II era the golden age of food processing. And that's when industrial food packaging and processing was almost in its prime. And you see all of these products that are available. And the abundance was amazing, especially to people who had experienced the Great Depression and the deprivation of the wartime. To come back in the 1950s and 60s with all of these products was exciting and fun and interesting, and to find American cuisine through these industrial packaged products. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of positives to this huge industrial agriculture and product output. And so the positives are, I think you have to click the forward button.
Okay. Oh, is it not showing?
No, I think they appear one at a time, I think. If you hit the space bar, oh, they're not there. Okay, let's see. Oh, there we go.
Okay, great.
So here are the positive. It creates more food available for people. That's a great thing. It's cheaper. It's more available and affordable for most of the population. The canning and later freezing of food produces more variety, especially fruits and vegetables that were only available during particular seasons. And so that's good, especially as ideas about the values of fruits and vegetables having vitamins, being good for you, becomes more important, more discovered in the early 20th century and into the 20th century. These food products have a longer shelf life, and they're innovative. They're fun to try. They're interesting. They make meal planning for a busy woman with a lot of, say, many children, more interesting and provide some relief in some ways. Let me go to the next slide.
Okay.
But there's also trade-offs. With the abundance comes some possible negatives.
Amy, I'm sorry, I don't know. Oh, there they are.
Oh,
Okay, got it.
At some point, people started to ask themselves, well, maybe how much food do we need? If we have 3,000 calories per person available in the food supply, how much really do we need? That was one question. The American food supply tended to value quantity over quality, seeing the volume of food as more important than, say, the quality of food. And so that was another question that came via industrial agriculture. There's something to be said about eating fruits and vegetables in season, waiting for peach season, waiting for melon season, anticipating that, and then having those melons that are at the peak of ripeness, enjoying them, as opposed to having canned fruits and vegetables all year round and losing that anticipation. Also, the diversity of fruits and vegetables go from multiple numbers of kinds of apples, for instance, down to 2, red delicious and golden delicious. And so a loss of diversity comes through industrial agriculture. Then, of course, to preserve all the food, you're adding additives that at some point people begin to wonder if that's the best way to go. And of course, we have environmental effects, the enormous outputs of soil, water, waste products at the end. This leads to a loss or change of taste, what we call the industrial palate, where Americans become more acclimated to eating food that have a prominent sugar or salt or fat forward flavor. And so it leads to changes in eating habits as well. So we can go to the next slide.
You know, Amy, we have a question here from the audience, and it says, a recent stat said that farmers are less than 2% of the population now. Has that changed with home gardeners growing their own food?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think it might even be less than 2% now. It might even be down to 1%. I mean, I think a lot of people are growing food more. I think COVID has piqued people's interest in home food production, but I don't think we call those farms. I think that doesn't calculate into the idea about farms. Farms have a certain particular definition to them. There are small farmers, moderate farmers, and large farms. And I'm not up on the statistics about the number of small farmers, whether that's increasing or not, but that's a really good question. This changes the way we eat. And so through the 20th century, we have the hot meal that often was at the midday during pre-industrial period that shifts to the evening. We get this modern notion of lunch, a cold sandwich eaten away from home. There's more eating out, more eating establishments, a softening of what food rules we have and creating new foods and eating opportunities beyond the 3 meals that Americans were accustomed to. And these are not all bad or good things. These are just changes that happen with the change in the food supply. And we can go to the next slide. So there are fewer rules. If you can scroll through, you can just move all of these. Yeah. So there were some rules that bound our eating, such as only eat at meal times, eat sitting at a table with others, don't eat in the library, to use it one, moderate portion sizes, dessert at the end of the meal. And you can see how these have shifted to a more looser, laxer idea about when we can eat, what we can eat, where we can eat, with whom. And so all of that leads to just 24/7 availability of eating, which causes a lot of anxiety for people. We can go to the next slide. Oh, it also leads to eating almost 3 times as many solid fats and added sugars than is probably healthy for us. So this is from the 2010 USDA dietary guidelines. There are since new ones. New ones have being developed, but that you can see that Americans aren't eating enough of whole grains, vegetables, fruits, and are eating way too many solid fats and added sugar, which is the result of the industrialized food supply. So there are health implications. I'm just going to quickly go through the next one because my time is ending. So all of that abundance, cheap, highly processed, minimally nutritious, highly palatable food, plus those few relaxing of what few rules were available, has led to curated eating, what I call curated eating, which is an attempt to figure out how to put the brakes on our eating, how to not consume 24/7 as is the food that's available. And so I think there's 2 more slides. So we try to bind our food is by eliminating entire types and categories of food. And sometimes it's done for religious, medical, or ethical eating. But sometimes we redraw these boundaries by deciding we're only going to drink our food, or we're going to eat like cavemen did, or not eat anything that's white. So, sort of a way to provide rules for our eating that helps guide our eating and leads to more moderate eating. And then the last slide is to remind us, in the midst of all this abundance, we have so much food, there's so much available, it causes stress, and we are searching for ways to create rules for ourselves. There are still people in the United States that are not getting enough to eat and are not of the foods that are healthiest for them. And we call this food insecurity. So this is a table in food insecure households in 2016, but we can only wait for the statistics to come out with the COVID pandemic. And I'm sure these numbers are greater as well. So that's just a brief history of American abundance and food, bringing us from World War II to the current day.
Thank you, Amy. That was amazing and such an interesting overview. If anyone has questions for any of our panelists, please don't hesitate to let us know. You can put them into the chat, and we'll be happy to bring them forward. With that, we're thrilled to introduce Whitney Sherman, who's going to share some of the wonderful images she's been working on through the years.
Oh, hi, everyone. Good evening, and thank you, Stephanie and Mary and Rich and Alyssa, for the work you're doing to bring this forward, this presentation forward. And I just wanted to say it's my pleasure to be speaking tonight with Amy and Alana. We'd never met before, but I've learned a lot so far from both of them. And I think I'm definitely going to be looking up at least Alana. Maybe I'll bump into Amy next time I'm up in Western Massachusetts. So the presentation I'm showing tonight is called Illustrating Health, Home, and Food. And perhaps you could call it a bit of a homily toward those three things. As an illustrator, I'm often given projects that need to convey an abundance of information. I do this through visual devices such as the raised hand in the poster on the left for the Norman Rockwell Unity Project to show energetic engagement, or on the right-hand side, the breast cancer research stamp that I did for the US Postal Service to show the figure of Artemis reaching for an arrow to strike down breast cancer, while simultaneously replicating the stance of women to take a self-exam. Sorry. Also in the Unity poster is the call to vote laid on top of a lush vegetation, which is a metaphor for the environmental concerns we all have. In talking about freedom from want, I drew on images from 4 decades of work that I've done as an editorial illustrator. Most were not done specifically for the topics we're talking about here, but they could easily come to represent the topics of health, home, and food, as illustration uses metaphors and visual references to images and ideas that we all understand. We've all been affected by the pandemic, forced into our homes, causing us to reevaluate what health, home, and food means to us. This new landscape is still being explored. We're seeking solace and comfort in the face of an airborne disease. Some of us are feeling penned in, others are feeling like the effort to stay positive and to find a new job for the one that we lost, or to manage teaching and entertaining our kids is never ending. That can bring on complications in our mental health, an area of the health spectrum, that's often underestimated. Unchecked, these health issues can heighten tensions in our relationships, making them difficult to repair, or demonstrating how badly we treat those closest to us. Mired in our own problems, we can lose sight of the plight of others, those people separated from their families through unreasonable laws. What all humans seek is comfort and joy, a sense of living and loving life, especially now. As we enter into the winter season, a time that's been celebrated with bringing light into our homes, we can contemplate, what is home? Is it the place where we grew up? Is it a place where we are now or at any given time? As we examine what home means to us, it's helpful to remember, perhaps even welcome in others. Remember and welcome in those from broken homes. Remember those that we've lost. Remember and welcome in those who are denied a home. This season and at all times, humans in general seek to be with others. We thrive on connection. And one way we connect is through food. As Amy mentioned earlier, the industrialization of agriculture has given us an abundance of food. As science has genetically modified foods, and our crops are unharmed by natural diseases, the crops we get now exceed the size of crops from Rockwell's day. In fact, the luxury of our abundance allows us to think of food not just as sustenance, but as a sensual experience. Even in this abundance, in cities like Baltimore, where I live, food deserts exist. As a college teacher, I'm aware that food insecurity exists among students whose families are stretching dollars to give their children a step up in life through an expensive education. I'll end with this one piece that I did for a book that asked me to work on the topic of excess. I was allowed to choose whatever that word meant to me. And I wanted to illustrate at that time my idea of showing a young collector casually sipping on tea in front of an excessive collection of beautiful dishes. I mentioned earlier that the images that I'm showing here tonight are from other unrelated assignments that I felt could be seen in a new light. And tonight, I'm seeing these young women as living the life so many of us aspire to have time for ourselves, to have comfort of a home, to be able to imagine filling our dishes with food we can share with others, the people that we love. Thank you.
Whitney, that was just beautiful. So as Whitney is changing her screen sharing, that was incredible.
Yeah, Whitney, that was amazing. Your work is extraordinary. And I'm wondering if you might say a few words about how you come up with concepts that are so complicated, that where you have to streamline your visual forms to say something that's very large and very significant. How do you do it?
I do rely on the words that are written with editorials. There's always an article. And if it's a news story and it's timely, a lot of times the article isn't written because it's happening right then, but at least you get a headline. And the headline will have a handful of words there that I can use as a springboard to start thinking of ideas. But if I do get a manuscript, I will go through it and I'll circle words in there that have meaning to me and use those words to stimulate visual ideas and start to put that together in some kind of maybe a recipe is a good word for tonight. Mm-hmm. And by putting those elements together, I'm able to see if there are shapes that are shared among different ideas, where I might be able to take one shape and have it replicate or have meaning for a number of different things. I really look for a lot of opportunities like that where I can take a color and give it some significance, to rely on that cultural currency that we all share in understanding what certain shapes and icons and colors can mean.
Thank you. What a wonderful presentation. With that, we are thrilled to turn the program over to Alana, and I will just put up a couple of her amazing food images. Let's see if I can get this to the right place. Let's see. Can everybody see that delicious bowl of cranberry sauce?
Stephanie, you're still on, you want to go to slideshow?
Slideshow, yes. Thank you. Nope. Okay, better? Not yet? Nope. Okay. And stop sharing. I'll try. I don't know why I'm having trouble with this tonight. I apologize, everybody. Is that better?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. Welcome, Alana.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mary and Stephanie and Rich, for the invitation to be here tonight. I am a lifelong Rockwell fan and have spent many happy hours at the museum. So I would kind of wish we were there tonight, but this seems like almost as good. So, and it's been really amazing to get to talk some with Amy and Whitney this week and just really turn my head in a different direction towards this holiday, which, as Mary said, I've been in her introduction, that I've been very much immersed in thoughts of Thanksgiving, mostly in my work at Guido's, which is a local supermarket that really comes to life in a major way during the holidays, both with ingredients and with prepared food. And I work in the marketing department, so I'm always trying to figure out how to communicate with people about what's happening next. And this year is so different in so many ways. So it's been quite an adventure to try to tune into what people need, and also give them something that they don't even know they need, because we're just all in such uncertainty. So yeah, so here we are. We are less than 2 weeks from Thanksgiving. And I think it's such an amazing framing, just taking in the two presentations. I think in terms of the history, the way that we, especially, sort of made clear is the way of how Amy sort of shared it with us, is that, we as Americans have always been, food has always been part of the identity of who we are. And yet we're also sort of don't really have a food culture. But I think that if there was ever any part of a culture that was ours, it's sort of the meal of Thanksgiving. And that, that takes us to, I have to say that I watched I watched Whitney's presentation in the few minutes before we started, quickly, to just get it in there. And I almost started crying as I was watching it. It was so moving to me. And I think, like, just the way that these emotions just sort of, they were just so, I don't even have words, but I was just so moved. And I was just thinking about that food culture of the meal, but also about how the wild thing about Thanksgiving is that it's totally boring. I mean, it's the only moment when we really don't have any choices as to what we're allowed to make. But really, the whole dynamic of the meal is about the emotions and the people who are there, and the way that we relate to the meal. And I don't think that there's any other meal like that. And I think it's totally unique that way. So I think as we think about this meal coming up, there's a lot that's at stake here, and especially where I don't know, where all of you who are listening, where you're tuning in from, but it seems like most places, at least in this country, are dealing with serious ramping up of COVID cases in this past week. And here in the Berkshires, we're dealing with that, in really massive numbers. And we even had our first staff cases in the store this week. So it was a pretty intense week. And I think, as we get so close to Thanksgiving, and it feels like it's hard to even make plans for next week, because maybe something that feels okay right now might not be okay next week. So I've been trying to think about the things that are really feel really essential. And I think that's what, when I think about what we really need from the holiday, I think, there are people say, like, I need the canned cranberry sauce, or like, I just really, I need that pumpkin pie that my grandmother used to make that now I recreate. And there are those things, and all right, there's my pumpkin pie. And I think, we need these particular dishes at this meal, because more than any other meal, this meal is all about emotion and all about memory. So I think that even if there's one or two people at the Thanksgiving table, it's important to always have those dishes. And, maybe it's not a whole turkey, maybe it's a turkey leg or a breast. And maybe, instead of normally making 6 pies, there's just 1 pie. But I think we have to recognize that these dishes hold emotion and memory and feeling. I'm seeing a question. Yes, the recipes are going to come to you. I promise. They'll come right after. So I think, right, Mary, we've got recipes coming. Okay. So yeah. So I think, that's my biggest takeaway from sort of thinking about what people need, is that, we all are making sacrifices. We're not typically, I usually have 30 people around my table. It's my favorite time. We have stragglers all the time coming, like, oh, I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have anywhere to go. they'll come and we set up extra tables, and it's just I love it. And this year it's just our family, which is amazing. Just our little family. But those dishes are really non-negotiable because it's essential that we still have we have all those memories and those feelings around our food. So I love that we're looking at these. I hope that everyone gets a chance to look at these images. So these are the appropriations, I think was the word, of the freedom from want. And this really, it's like the table looks the same, but everything changes, right? So you have like a completely different family with different foods on the table, all sort of in the same format. And I think this really shows that Thanksgiving is like, it's like a template that we put on, and then every single table is different. Are we going to see another one too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got a couple more. Yeah.
Yes, I love it. I love this. I also think, I want to just, because I think we haven't really gotten to talk about this, and I'm less of a presenter and more of a converser. So if anyone wants to pop in and talk to that. But I just wanted to bring up something that came up in a conversation that we had earlier in the week, just so that we can make sure that we all take a moment to really, and so you can see that the food in this image is pretty similar to the food that's in the original painting. And just like how weird the food is, I think that's really important to think about, like that there is just big stalks. Oh, that one, see, this one's really much more lavish, although there's not very much food we can see. But in the original image of Freedom from Want, it's like, it's really not about the food, it's about the faces, which is because there's not a lot of food on the table.
Alana, we have a question actually. We do have a question, and that is, do you ever get into arguments with friends and family about how food is prepared?
Oh, always. I mean, food is for arguing about, right? And I think, especially, I think another one of the, I think it was Amy brought up in another, at another moment in our earlier conversation, which I keep bringing in here, is that Thanksgiving should be a potluck, right? So we always have people coming, and they'll bring the thing that's the most exciting thing for them, and they'll bring their great aunt's green bean casserole and this and that. And I think there's always judgment and feelings about how things are prepared. I had one particular Thanksgiving early on in my adulthood where I will leave names unsaid here, but we got together with another family. And I was still really early on in my learning how to cook. So I think that I was in charge of the turkey, and I had made one a few years earlier. But we sort of tried to figure out all the things and worked recipes, and it was just the worst meal ever. It was terrible. It was so bad. But I think that there's definitely, like, people fight over the way that things should be. Should sweet potatoes have marshmallows on them? I mean, does anyone have feelings about that?
Never.
Never, right? Some people think they have to, right? Or like, is it worth making green bean casserole if you're not going to use Campbell's cream of mushroom soup?
So related to that, Alana, how do you balance, innovation with tradition on a holiday like Thanksgiving? What are your suggestions?
Well, I do think that it's good to let things shift and change. So I think that that for me, a lot of times it's my kids who bring in new recipes. So, they'll find something in their travels, and like, I'm not going to say no to making like these crazy beer cheddar rolls or whatever. But I think allowing new traditions to come in is really essential. And also just letting go of the meal is really important. And I think though the best sort of new traditions have come in for me when that's happened. but yeah, I think just like, and on in other years when people can come to the table, I think, you know, taking those foods in as your new traditions is a great thing too, and letting things shift and change.
Something that I'm very conscious of listening to all three of you is you're all very sensitive and aware of people who, or any of us around who have want or need. And I wonder, as we head into a holiday that's going to be different for everyone, whether it's abundant or not, some ways that we can keep in mind and support those who may be struggling. And I know, Alana, you're doing a lot of work with Guido's on food insecurity, and maybe there's some tangible suggestions for our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think especially with COVID, I know that you know, the Food Bank of Western Mass, which is our sort of umbrella food bank that supports all the smaller food banks in the area. I know that they have been, you know, serving 20% more people than the year before, just during COVID, I think. And they're seeing tons of new people who have never been to food pantries before. So the need is so great. And I think, you know, luckily there's so many businesses that are kind of providing opportunities to pitch in. And I think, especially in these moments when it can be harder to volunteer in person, because safely interacting in person can be challenging. But I think, you know, food banks and food pantries need money, and that's the best thing to do right now. And I think it's really, you know, especially helpful. I think coming into a holiday is to sort of think about that as part of your budget. I think that can be a really helpful way to think about it, is that especially if your table is small and you can't bring people in, is to think like, okay, I've got this much for groceries, and then, you know, what else, what can I donate right now in order to help feed other people. And I think that can be a really nice way just to remember that abundance, and also be allowing for I think, as Whitney so beautifully said, inviting people in to your home who need that. And because yeah, they need money. And I think that's the best way. I think there's often ways to donate food, and that's wonderful, but big food banks and food pantries have so many ways of being able to purchase food. In, you know, the Food Bank of Western Mass can create 4 meals with $1, which is amazing. So if you think about what $50 can buy, you're making a huge impact.
So if we all think about setting the table with extra places, but make a donation instead.
Yeah, and you know, every area has a Food Bank of Western Mass. You know, every area has, or you may have a local food pantry that's right around the corner, and will be very grateful for this.
The other piece we haven't touched on that both from the grocery and historical perspective is supply chains, and how interrupted they've been in this time, and what that means for people. And I don't know, Amy, if you have thoughts on that.
I do. Could I piggyback on what Alana?
Of course.
Comment about Thanksgiving and thinking of others at this time. It's super important, and it's always enriches the holiday for me when I do that. My kids and I have a tradition on Thanksgiving morning. We go down to a group called God's Love We Deliver, which delivers meals to homebound people, originally with AIDS, but all sorts of conditions now. So we do that and relieve the truck drivers who don't have to do that on Thanksgiving, which is great. But we also just need to think about, I'm hearing an echo. Is that, I don't know if, maybe I'll turn it down. Back to this idea of American abundance. We have so much food. We have more food than we need to feed people sufficiently. And I really think we need to ask ourselves as a nation, in a world where food should be a universal human right. It is a universal human right. It's part of the UN Declaration of Human Rights. What is our obligation to our fellow citizens? Can we be in the richest country of the world and have there be people in this country who do not have sufficient food or sufficient healthy food. I think it really speaks to the fundamental nature of a democracy and the wealth that we have. And if we're not meeting everybody's needs, why not, given that the food is there? So it's giving at this seasonal time, but it's larger structural inequities that are creating this disparities that I think we as a nation, as citizens, have an obligation to correct. And then what was the other thing you were, oh, food chains, oh, supply, yes.
No, I think,
Well,
I mean, you addressed it.
Enormous, I mean, we have this, just an enormous, amazing food supply chain that has experienced shocks during COVID. We understand how globally connected we are. We understand how nationally connected we are. And so when there's a crisis, we see chinks in that supply chain. However, there's so much resilience and redundancy in the supply chain that it has very quickly patched itself together and created rerouted foods, reimagined, the creativity and innovation of restaurants trying to still stay in business is interesting and gratifying, I think. I had another thought, but anyway, we're watching. Oh, I know that we have an alternative food movement of trying to eat more local, trying to not have our apples be shipped from Washington when we've got delicious apples in our region. And so we're trying to bolster and strengthen those regional food supplies because it's better for our health, it's better for the environment, it's better for the farmers, and also the food is more delicious because it's fresher. So we need to think of food chains in global, national, and regional ways.
And some of that is happening structurally through grant programs. And I mean, there is an effort to create more food security regionally through small farms. Is that accurate? Yeah.
I think so. There are initiatives that are trying to link farmers to institutions, to gleaning projects, so that no food is not wasted. There's an estimate 40% of food in the food supply that's wasted, which is, if you think about it, just shocking. And if we could close those gaps at production, processing, and consumption levels, we could do so much to increase food security.
That actually gets to the question, and maybe this is one of our last questions, but for each of you, what is your hope for the future of food, and not only in terms of the structural challenges, but also in terms of connection and joy? Alana, you want to take it, and then we'll go to Whitney?
Gosh, the future, that's a tiny question. My hope for the future of food, I think, is that people can stop fearing it. A lot of my current passion is about people's fear of food and fear of their bodies and fear, feelings that food might kill you or might make you a superhero, like sort of blowing food up into something bigger than it needs to be.
And is this speaking to Amy's over curation? Yeah,
definitely. And I think like what I would like to see is a return to food as nourishment, and a connection, and encouraging of people to connect with their intuitions and their hunger, their, like, what they're hungry for, and to try to move away from so much fear that food will make us fat or will make us sick or will make us glow, or like the good things and the bad things, all that. I think that I'd like to see a move towards food as nourishment. That's my biggest hope, and to reconnect with, just the joy of cooking and eating and sharing it, without being so terrified of it and of our own bodies.
I'll just piggyback on Alana. I agree with you 100%. I think the idea of nutritionism, just thinking about food as nutrients, I think has led to poorer health rather than better health. And if we know anything, we know that we eat food, we don't eat nutrients. And there's a reason, and that creates human health, as you were saying, nutrition, wellness, but also spiritual health and well-being. And I really love this word commensality, which is about just food in a context with friends or family, or even yourself, just enjoying the food, being grateful for it, appreciating it, and thinking about it as pleasure as opposed to terror, like you were saying, Alana.
Amen to that.
I have two thoughts about food. One has to do with how we get our food in containers. Some of the food that we're getting, even if you buy a bag of oranges, you're ending up getting it in a plastic bag. And my husband and I are working really hard to try and figure out how we can, you know, you want to separate, you don't want your oranges rolling on the conveyor belt in the grocery store. You want to kind of put them in something. And we're trying to figure out ways. We've got some special bags that help keep the fruit fresher longer. And whether we can use those, take them to the store and put them in there, and then how we would clean them once we got. So we're thinking about that. We're thinking about the plastic that a lot of things come in and what we can do to reduce that. So that's one thing I think about with food, is how, you know, there is bulk, but bulk doesn't happen in every kind of food that you want to get. The other thing that I think about food is not food that goes in your mouth, but food for your soul. So I recently gave a presentation, and one of the students had asked me where I put spirituality in my work. And I was really kind of taken back, because I never think about spirituality when I'm making illustrations. I'm usually on a deadline, and that's what I'm thinking about, aside from the concept. But I did say back to him that I am not a religious person. I don't go to church anymore. I've gone through all those things and made my decisions. But my church is really in my garden. I raise flowers and I grow trees and bushes. And that's where everything is for me. Everything that makes sense in life is right in the garden. And so the food that brings to me is a sense of well-being, a sense of connection to the earth. And it's a celebration. Even when things didn't make it, I've put the effort in. I can enjoy it for that moment. And if it doesn't survive, that's part of nature. That's part of the cycle of everything. And so it brings me to a place of acceptance that I think is really genuine and important for me.
Well, I think what a pleasure to be with all of you this evening. I think the combination of visual perspective, historical perspective, on the ground, making it happen with our community right now, while also coming up with wonderful recipes. The three of you just embody so much of the combination is extraordinary. So why don't we finish with one thing that you're all looking forward to cooking this Thanksgiving, while we're also planning our contributions to those in need. And for anybody listening, I know we have quite a few people both on YouTube and in the Zoom call. Anybody who registered, we will send you Alana's recipes in the next hour.
Pumpkin pie.
Okay.
Right, Alana's recipe.
Alana's ginger pumpkin pie.
We've been talking about that all day, Stephanie.
I agree. That looks like a fabulous recipe. Yeah, I think the pies are where my heart goes at Thanksgiving. Other people can cook the turkey, but the pies are the fun part for me.
Very, Alana.
We're skipping turkey this year
Wow.
because we have such a small table, and I'm so excited because I really do not love cooking turkey, and it takes the oven for so long. And so my husband's smoking 2 chickens in the smoker outside, which I'm thrilled about. But the thing that I am most excited, this is something I make every year. I know I was talking about switching it up, but I make a cornbread chorizo stuffing, which I think I got from maybe like Bon Appetit 10 years ago, and I just have it printed out. And it's so fun because then I like make the cornbread the day before, and then it gets stale. You know, I leave it out to get stale, and then it's the whole thing. And then we make enough so that like we can eat it the next day with eggs baked into it, and it's just really better. And I only make it once a year. It's crazy. I think it takes like 2 pounds of butter, and that's not even considering the cornbread part. It's just like so fun and delicious, but we just make a ton of it. So I cannot wait to make that again. That's what I'm most excited about. The cornbread, can we get the cornbread recipe? I do have a cornbread recipe. I'm happy to try to get it out there in some way. Mary has 3 recipes for you. She has Brussels sprouts, my grandmother's cranberry sauce, which is like a very sort of tart, easy to make and very fresh cranberry sauce, and then that ginger pumpkin pie. So, but I do have a cornbread recipe, yes. And that cornbread chorizo stuffing, I think if you look up in Bon Appetit, it'll probably be somewhere on the internet.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
Mary, there is a great comment from Catherine, which is basically that she is feeling that being together is what this is all about, and giving thanks, and that's what she's looking forward to. So, agree. I think we're lucky if we can do that.
well, and thank goodness, even while we're isolated in different spots, we can have this experience of being together. And what a nice feeling of togetherness on a night that is cold and dark, and we're coming in from all over the country. So thank you again, and good night, everybody.
Yeah, thank you for a wonderful program, to our great speakers, and thank you all for watching.
Thank you. It was lovely.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.